us look at what you call body mass index. Okay, so we want to know what it is, how do we determine it, and how do we make sure that the determination of the body mass index is actually very accurate, and what are the limitations associated with basically the body mass index, which is basically BMI. Okay, so we look at that using the scenario here. So what you're basically having is Liam, who has visited a physician, or basically he has gone to see a doctor. And while there, the nurse is asked to determine Liam's body mass index. And this nurse takes Liam's body weight, okay, and then also his height. So how will this nurse determine Liam's body mass index using these parameters, using the body weight in kilograms, and then also using the height? She has determined that his body weight is actually 64 kilograms, and then the height is actually 1.6 meters. Okay, so if we know that the normal range for the body mass index is 18.5 to 24.9, having determined the body mass index for Liam, where does that BMI actually fall? Is it normal or it is abnormal? Is it falling above the normal range or below the normal range? Can you explain one limitation associated with body mass index? So that's the scenario that we are having here, and we need to use it to explain what the body mass index is and how we take the body mass index. Okay, so when we talk about body mass index, which we usually abbreviate as BMI, it's about measuring the body's fat based on one's weight and height. And that is why Liam's height and body weight was actually taken. It gives us an idea about the potential risks that a person could be having. The meaning of that is that if, for example, someone has a high BMI, we can anticipate that this person is likely to have some complications associated with obesity. And we know that someone with obesity, it means that they're having a lot of body weight. And this is associated with the fat that they're having in their bodies. Okay, so this is associated with the diabetes, associated with hypertension and other heart complications. So the reason as to why we are saying is that it is used for screening people such that we can determine whether they are at risk or not, is because it is not definitive, meaning that if if you have abnormal BMI, we basically just say that you are at risk of ABCD. Okay, but we are not basically saying that you have this problem, you have diabetes, you have hypertension. No, we are just saying you're at risk of ABCD. Okay, so that's what it means. We screen individuals to determine if they are at risk of having some complications. So how do we take the BMI? So we use two things. One is the height, and then two is the weight. Okay, so what do we use to measure these things? For the weight, you have weighing scales, okay, which you can stand on, and then we get your weight in kilograms. Okay, and then for height, we can use what we call the stadiometer. So the stadiometer is basically, it's made up of a rod. It can be a wooden rod. It can be plastic. Still, it can still work. what it basically has, it has graduations, such that you just stand on a flat surface, and then usually that flat surface is part of the stadiometer you just stand on, and then another person takes the reading for your height. Okay, so that person, of course, needs to determine that the reading is accurate. So to ensure that the person whose height is being taken, the person should stand straight with arms on the side and not having high heeled shoes. Okay, so the person should be straight, not bending, and the arms should be on the sides and looking forward directly. And then the person who is taking the reading of the height should make sure that that reading is taken at eye level. So the person needs to make sure that they take the appropriate readings. Okay. So heavy clothes too can actually make the readings false. So make sure that there are no shoes, there are no heavy clothing. The heavy clothings are associated with increasing the weight that the person will have. So make sure these shoes and these heavy clothing are actually removed to make sure that the weight that you're taking is the weight of the individual. Okay, so the height has to be in meters. Okay, the height has to be in meters, that is one, and then the weight has to be in kilograms. So even if you are given calculations, a number to calculate, you make sure that the units are always kilograms for the weight, and also the height is in meters. And then from there you can determine the body mass index. So for the case, for example, if you have someone who has a height of, let us say, 170 centimeters, that is their height, you need to make sure that you convert that to meters. And in this case, the person's height will be 1.7 meters. Okay, so what are the units? What are the units of BMI? The units have to be kilogram per meter squared, and we shall know why those are the units. Those units are derived from the formula that we have for body mass index. So what happens is that for you now to determine the body mass index, you need to divide the weight, which is in kilograms, divided by the height squared. The height has to be squared. Okay, that's the formula for determining body mass index. So the nurse, having determined the height and also the weight, the nurse will divide the weight divided by the height, and then the height has to be squared. Okay, the answer that they will get will be the body mass index. Okay, so if you have a person who is 65 kilograms and is 1.7 meters, to determine their body mass index, we get that 65 kilograms divided by 1.7 squared. Okay, 1.7 squared. So 1.7 squared, what do you get? You get 2.89. So you have 65 divided by 2.89, and you get a body mass index of 22.5. Okay, 22.5 kilograms per meter squared. Those are the units there. Okay, so we are not all the same. Okay, we cannot have the same body mass index. Why? Because our heights are different, and then also apart from the heights, even even our weight is not the same. But does not mean that if we are of the same age bracket, and we are not having the same BMI, does it mean that one of us is actually abnormal? It may not necessarily be the case. The whole point is that we have ranges. We have ranges for people. Say, if someone has a BMI of this range to this range, they are either normal, or they are obese, or they need to think about their weight. Okay, so that's why we have these different categories for the BMI. So a person who is underweight, that means that this person, their body, um, their body fat is actually less, and that's why they are very small and they are underweight. So a person who has a BMI of 18.5, yeah, and below, okay, less than 18.5, that person is underweight. A person who has um, a BMI above 18.5 to 24.9, that person is within the normal range. And then a person who is overweight, that person has 25 to 29.5 BMI. A BMI that is above 30, that is obese. Okay, so for the case that we calculated earlier on, this case here, the person has a BMI of 22.5. That person is within the normal range. So the person has normal weight. Okay, that's what we have there. So the implication is that if you have a person who has abnormal BMI, the implication is that this person is at a risk of complications. So if the person is, for example, undernourished, that means that they can easily get infections because their immunity is actually low, and it could be difficult for them to conceive, for example, if it is a woman or if it is a man, they may actually be infertile. Okay, so that means that it is if you have abnormally low BMI that is less than 18.5, those are the health issues that you get. And usually these are happening because you're not eating well or because you have a disease that is making you not to have appetite. Or sometimes you have eating disorders. So what do you do for a such person who has a low BMI? Of course, you refer them to see a professional such that they can seek for medical help. Okay, some of them can actually be encouraged to eat foods that contain a lot of proteins or basically a balanced diet. Okay, so they need to eat foods that have a lot of nutrients, and we often call these foods as nutrient dense foods. Okay, or they can also exercise, because if you don't exercise, if you remain in one place, your muscles waste, so the person loses weight. So the person can engage in exercises to make sure that their muscles can actually build. But again, regular checks are very important to identify what is actually causing the problem. So if the person is having a BMI that is higher, higher than normal, that person is at risk of getting hypertension, diabetes, joint problems, and also heart problems. So the causes of this is when the person eats a lot of food that has a lot of fats, okay, and they don't exercise. That causes them to have a lot of weight. So they become overweight. Okay, of course, overweight results into obesity, and again, the risks actually increase their own. Okay, so what should they do? Still, they need to consult a trained professional such that they can be helped. Okay, but as always, make sure that they eat well, a healthy diet. So avoiding all these junk foods, making sure that they control the amount of carbohydrates or the calorie intake that they have. Exercise is very important, at least 30 minutes a day can be very so BMI can be a starting point. That is why we actually call it a screening exercise. Okay, meaning that it is not definitive, does not give you the final results about someone's nutritional status, for example. So what we do is that we carry out these calculations of the BMI when we also carry out other tests. such that we can have a very good understanding of someone's nutritional and health status. So that means that it is very important for you to have your body weight in check. For people who don't do strenuous activities, it could be very important that you basically engage in activities. People who don't uh, engage in these activities, physical activities, okay, so we call that sedentary lifestyle. Okay, that is sedentary lifestyle. So you don't want to be in such a situation. Such individuals have a high risk of getting diabetes, hypertension, and basically getting obese. And so eating well is very important. Keeping fit is also very important. How much do you eat? The food guide pyramid can actually help you in planning the meals that you eat, depending on your nutritional needs. Of course, that pyramid can always be changed according to your own needs. What your friend may need in terms of nutrition may not be the same things that you actually also need. That's why the diet should be planned according to your nutritional needs. Yes, so for this case, we get that is 64 divided by 1.6 squared. The answer that we get there will be the BMI. Will that BMI be normal? I believe it should be normal. And then one limitation of using BMI. The challenge is that BMI may not take into consideration either. Actually, BMI does not take into consideration a person's physical outlook. Okay, so the person can have a lot of muscle and therefore a lot of weight, and they are fit, and they have a BMI which is very high, and that may not be a true reflection of what the person is. The person could actually be very fit, but is having bulky muscles, and therefore a BMI being very high may not really depict the fact that he's actually being obese. So that's one limitation.